Good Monday morning. Well, like pretty much every Monday morning, headed to Warner Robins here. Over the weekend, I turned in a couple assignments for the nurse practitioner program, and then had a quiz. Did a lot better on this quiz than I did the midterm the other day. So, bringing my GPA back up for that class at least. But not a whole lot happened this weekend. My Spent some time with the kids. My wife gave me a facial. She's a esthetician. I think I mentioned it before, but gave me a facial. Hadn't had one a little bit, and I don't know. I ain't gonna lie. Your boy was looking pretty nice the next day. I Another thing that I had ordered and it came in. I had seen a couple people talk about the Moroccan hair oil treatment stuff, so I figured I'd give it a try. And I gotta say, I love the smell, the way it makes my hair feel, and everything. And I wish I really would have started using it a long time ago. It works wonders. A little bit on the expensive side, I will say. It's crazy because the the old me that grew up living in a trailer on food stamps and my grandmother raising me on a social security check every month definitely would not have foreseen me spending that much on a bottle of hair gel or hair treatment or whatever you want to call it. Uh, Sometimes it just it's crazy to me sometimes. I take a step back, realizing what I came from and where I am now. Like my grandmother raised me for the most part until I was about, I'm gonna say 12. It was like 11 or 12. I can't remember exactly. Uh, yeah, she was with my grandfather, I guess you could say. He was um, not necessarily a lumberjack, but he worked for commercial logging. He was a logger. There you go. And he would be out of town for work a lot, and he was basically cheating on her and doing whatever he wanted to while he was gone. And then he would come home, give her a little bit of money, and drink a bunch of beer and stuff like that. And that was, and then after he'd get good and drunk, he'd start trying to beat up on, the grandkids or her, or if he got into a mood where he was, sexually frustrated, he'd, grew up around molestation and stuff like that as well. Not a great guy to grow up around. My grandmother, in her defense, didn't know about the latter until much later, and then when she found out about the sexual molestation and stuff like that, she pretty much kicked him out, never invited him back again, and I think it caused her to go into a downward spiral a little bit as well, because like she knew he had problems and stuff like that, but it was still her companion in a way. But at the same time, she couldn't forgive something of that nature. But pretty much, she was she lived off of a social security check that came every month. So being with her, we were food stamps, social security, and I think she had Medicaid maybe or something like that. So basically, government assistance was purely what kept us going in a way. And then my aunts, uncles, and other people that were like close relatives, so to speak. They were all, including my mom at the time, were all drinking or doing drugs. My mom, she was real bad on meth. She later got off of it, and when my grandma passed away, she basically kind of pulled her to the side and was like, "Hey, it's time for you to be a mom to your son." And my mom did her best, tried to get off meth, but she had had years of abuse at that point. So it was very hard for her, and even after she did get off, she still had a bunch of residual issues that, never really got resolved. Aunts, uncles, pretty much same kind of thing. In and out of jail, prison, meth, drugs, alcohol. Some of them more so than others. But one of the things that's always got me is, I joined the Army right out of high school and everything to kind of change my family tree. And, because growing up with, the grandfather, that was the only kind of male role model I had, which was obviously not a very great one. And then when my mom was kind of bouncing from stepdad to stepdad, first one she got with was a guy named Decker, and he was a meth cook. My mom was obviously, that's all she knew. She'd been in that world for so long, so that's the only kind of people she knew. So she kind of fell back into it at first when she first took me in. And I didn't realize what was going on back in the day, but looking back at it, I mean, it was definitely stuff being cooked in the house. We had aluminum foil on the windows and all the key, telltale signs. Growing up, I didn't even really realize it. And then I remember, him beating on my mom, and I had gotten like an aluminum baseball bat and basically fractured or cracked one of his shins, defending her in one of his, crazed moments. And he tried to have me arrested and sent to juvenile detention for the whole thing, but luckily my mom finally, spoke out against him, and we left. And then my mom got with a guy named John. He was a guy that he had recovered off of drug abuse and stuff like way back in the day. He was a pretty clean guy. He was a truck driver. So my mom basically got with him and everything, and we stayed at home. He was an over-the-road truck driver, so he'd be gone 2-3 weeks at a time, come home. My mom would try to make sure everything was, pristine, because he was one of those guys where if anything was out of place, he would just start raising Cain, and had a huge temper issue because of all that. They were together for about 5-6 years. I think at about the 3-year mark, he had like a massive heart attack. He had to have open heart surgery, had to have his aortic valves replaced, and a bunch of other stuff at the VA hospital in Gainesville, which is a really nice place. But after that, he wasn't able to drive trucks anymore, and I think he went into a depression state, and he was just kind of not necessarily physically abusive like Decker was. I mean, he literally burned cigarettes out on my legs just for his own amusement, I guess. But yeah, he was more of the, emotional and verbal. He would just say things and do things that would just get to you at a different level rather than a physical thing. For instance, like I was working in in the fields, tobacco fields, cantaloupes, watermelons, stuff like that at a young age. And he would just drop me off, come at the end of the day, pick me up, like during the summertime and the weekends and stuff like that. And then, when he would pick me up on Fridays, he would just take my check, cash it, and keep it to pay bills. So, I was doing all this work outside of school and during my summers and never seen a single paycheck. And then my mom and him split up. She couldn't take it anymore after his surgery, and just the man, I think he was always that man. It was just, now he was there all the time. So she actually kind of cheated on him for a little bit and got with this last guy named Terrell, and then they stayed together and got married. Like, got divorced from John and got married. Terrell, I will admit, was not the greatest guy in the world, but comparatively to the others, was a pretty decent guy. Again, I was kind of working, and I think I was either 15 or 16 whenever my mom got around him. And so I started working, and he didn't take my paycheck, but it was very inclined that he wasn't giving me nothing. I had to pay for my own cell phone bills. If I bought like a little rinky-dink car, I would always have to fix it and work on it and everything else bought it for like $900 or something like that, because he was charging me gas money to take me back and forth to work and stuff of that nature. So it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, well, I'm giving you a roof over your head, past that you're on your own, or you gotta pay me some gas money or XYZ, or nothing's coming from me for free, which in a way I kind of respect it, because it taught me responsibility, and that I wasn't going to get any handouts in a way. But growing up around all these things that I've mentioned, I never really got to be a kid per se, and I didn't even realize what I went through wasn't normal, is probably the strangest part of it all. It wasn't until I joined the Army after high school, and I started getting around, what I tell people all the time, the first time I was around real men, like men that took care of their families, were husbands and fathers to their kids, was when I joined the Army. I remember Staff Sergeant Rios. He's probably a first sergeant now, I would imagine, if he's still even in. But if you're still out there, I'm gonna say Sergeant Rios. It was Daniel Rios from 401FA, 4th Regiment, 1st Field Artillery. He was a sergeant that took me to the side. He realized I had a troubled past. I don't know if he could see it because he had it too. But yeah, he definitely took me under his wing and invited me to some of his family functions and stuff like that. And it was the first time. And he was a Mexican guy. He was a very proud Mexican guy, very family oriented. And when I got around him and his family, it just changed something in me, because I seen, what a family should be in a way. And it wasn't until I was about 18, 19 years old that I even seen that, So huge influence on my life. I can't thank him enough. Another one was Staff Sergeant Odell. When 401FA went to Jordan and we came back and everything like that, I had got moved over to the 6th 6-1 Cav, so 6th Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division. And when I got moved to 6-1 Cav, the next sergeant that I had that was real impactful for me was Staff Sergeant Odell. He was another really good guy. Nothing too crazy about him though. Or actually, I'm sorry, Staff Sergeant Odell. He was in 401FA as well. He was the sergeant that was there when we came back and everything like that. He was there, kind of in the rears, taking care of everything. They had downsized the numbers, so I didn't take the whole time over in Jordan and stuff. Basically, I did all the training up to, was getting to go, everything like that, and then the plug got pulled on that about 3/4 of the way through. So I got sent back home, and he was there for that. Then that's when I started working on a bunch of clinic stuff for the military and stuff like that. When I went to 6-1 Cav, there wasn't really a lot of good senior leadership there, in my opinion. There was comparatively to 401FA, 4th Battery, 1st Field Artillery. But it just, I mean, I had a little bit of time left on my contract, and I remember talking to Staff Sergeant Rios, and he told me, he's like, I've looked at your ASVAB scores, I looked at your other stuff as your platoon sergeant. He's like, what are you doing here? He's like, your testing scores are through the roof. He's like, you easily could be, an officer, a doctor, a nurse, or a PA or something. He's like, your testing scores are high enough for it. He's like, and I kind of explained to him about my upbringing and everything, and he understood, and he was like, well, finish out your term here, finish out your contract, and whenever it comes time to renew, he's like, I really want you to sit down and think about it. He's like, because whether you do your 4 years of your contract or you do 12 years, he's like, you don't get the retirement until you hit 20. Unless, you get like some kind of medical retirement because you get injured in the line of duty, which, nobody wants that kind of retirement. And he's like, so just look at it really hard. He's like, because he's like, I could see you going back, getting out, going to college, and doing great things. He's like, you're a great soldier, though. He's like, so I could also see you doing 20, 30 years, probably going green to gold, which means going from enlisted to officer, and doing great things that way as well. And, that was one of the last conversations I had with him, because he was, going over to Jordan, and he was staying over there, and, I got put back in the rears with Staff Sergeant Odell, who, again, was a nice guy, and he was a great mentor, too, but nowhere near as much as Staff Sergeant Rios. So, when I went over there it was just hard for me, kind of all these transitions. And when it came time to it, when I was in 401FA, had I stayed with them, I feel as though I may have re-enlisted. 6-1 Cav is honestly the reason I got out of the Army. There was so much, I'm just going to say politics. There was so much politics going on comparatively to 401FA. There was, the leadership style was entirely different. 401FA, you felt like you were part of a team. Everyone knew what was going on, why we were doing what we were doing. And, you had senior leadership that had your back. And you had real leaders, in my opinion. When I went to 6-1 Cav, I felt like I didn't really know what was going on. Nothing was really explained to us. The why behind, like we would we'd go to training events for like a month away from our families and everything, and we had no deployment orders coming up. Then we'd turn right around and go again. Like we'd be home for a week, turn right around and go out to the field again for 3 weeks out in Missouri. Then we'd come home for like a month or two, and then we'd go to the National Training Center in California and be out there for a whole month. Like it was, all we did was do testing and range and field all the time and was never home with no deployment orders, no nothing. And then like you couldn't even make medical appointments. Like I was having some dental stuff done, and the commander literally told us like, hey, you need to cancel your appointment, you're going to the field. Like you're not going to be able to make that appointment. And this is coming from the unit commander, not even like my platoon sergeant or nothing. It's coming down from the commander. And it was just a dog and pony show a lot of times. Nobody was looking out for each other. Everybody was just looking out for themselves. When I was with 401FA, it was like you had a list of things you were doing. Like every Monday was motor pool Mondays. You serviced all your vehicles. You went through the IT-10 forms, making sure everything was up and up. If you had any issues, you took it over to the mechanics bay, and you stuck with the truck to make sure they didn't need no help fixing it. You did all these things every Monday. So that was Mondays. For the medics, we also had to service all our medical equipment and everything like that, take it all out of the connexes, making sure everything's working, do inventory count of all the medications that we had, stuff like that. Every Monday, that's what we did. And on the first of every month, or the first Monday of every month also, we would go out to our privately owned vehicles, and the platoon sergeant would line all of our privately owned vehicles up, and we would even like motor pool style our own private vehicles where, we would make sure blinkers were working, brake lights, your fluids were topped up, your windows were working, and then we would fill out. So if anyone's in the military, they have this packet, like a leave packet. One of the things on the leave packet, if you're doing a private vehicle, is an inspection of the vehicle as part of your leave packet. So we would fill one of those out, and we would fill out the other stuff every month, like the first Monday of every month. That way, if anyone needed to take any kind of emergency leave or anything, the packet was basically ready. All they had to do was submit it with the dates. And we did that the first Monday of every month. If you had an appointment, you would actually get in trouble for not going to your appointments. And, they would try to move things around for you. And mind you, this unit deployed 2 times and did great things in them deployments and was considered one of the best field artillery units on the deployments. And 6-1 Cav did not deploy 1 time, but yet I was in the field probably 3 times as much with 6-1 Cav with no deployment orders. And honestly, I don't even when I was in full NFA, I felt like things were more structured and put together and made more sense than with 6-1 Cav as well. But yeah, so all of that to say, you know, that was the reason I got out. And, you know, I took Staff Sergeant Rios's advice and got out, went to college, got my ASN. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. While I was in as a medic, I got my EMTB, EMTI paramedic while I was in. And then I got out, got my ASN, turned around and got my BSN. I actually did the prereqs for med school, took the MCATs and everything, scored pretty decent on that. I'm not going to say I scored 100% or anything crazy. I honestly don't even remember my score off the top of my head, but it was enough to get into medical school. Applied for like 8 or 9 different med schools. Got acceptance letters from 3 of them. But my wife, we had our son and had some issues when he was first born. And then also, you know, she was pregnant with our daughter. So my whole stick is, you know, trying to change my family tree. And I was just looking at it. I knew I liked areas such as surgery, interventional cardiology, vascular. Like, I like the systems and everything like that. And I felt like I would probably wind up in one of those specialties. So you're talking roughly 10 years of school. So I'm sitting there looking at my family. I'm like, my son's going to be 12. My daughter will probably be about 11 by the time I just finish all this and start working. And I'm not even going to know them. Like, I'm not going to be able to attend any games, nothing. You know, like, I'm not even going to know my kids. And I started talking to some people that were already doing it, some interventional cardiology, some general surgeons, vascular surgeons, stuff like that. And pretty much every one of them was divorced. Only time their kids talked to them was when they wanted money. And, you know, I just took a step back and realized this isn't the life that I want to live. Like, it's not worth it to me to have the MD behind my name if I have to sacrifice my ultimate goal, which is to change my family tree and to be there and be, you know, a husband and a father and, you know, be a family. You know, admittedly, you know, I mentioned him earlier, Sergeant Rios. You know, I wanted that family, you know, that he had. You know, you got the beautiful wife, you got the kids that all love and respect you and look up to you, you know. And you can't have that if you're not present. And I knew if I went to med school, I wouldn't be present. And ultimately, it would fail. So I didn't go to med school. I finished out that year, and pretty much the next year is when COVID hit. So, you know, kind of like that old saying, you know, everything happens for a reason. COVID hit, pretty much shut everything down for, 2 years. And I started doing the traveling, and I had the inkling to do the nurse practitioner because a lot of it's online. You do have a lot of clinicals, and it would roughly take me like 2 years because of all the prereqs, and I already have my BSN. So I had the inkling probably 4 years ago, maybe 5, to do the family nurse practitioner that I'm doing now. But I just, at that time with COVID lockdown going on, and right after that I started doing the travel nursing, and they still had like COVID contracts and stuff going out. And the nurse practitioners in my area, because I live in rural South Georgia, they were making somewhere between 80 and 110. I was making probably, I'm not going to say exactly how much, but I was making more than what they were as a travel nurse. And when by a pretty good margin. So in my mind, I couldn't. And then the family nurse practitioner program, I mean, you're going to wind up spending somewhere between $30,000 to $40,000 by the time you complete it in that 2 years' time, between tuition, everything. And I'd already used up all my GI Bill doing the ASN and the BSN. So all my GI Bill was used up, and my pre-med. So I used up all my GI Bill for all of those things. So I had no more post 9/11 GI Bill, and anything I did was out of pocket. So I'm sitting there looking at it, I'm like, man, $30,000-$40,000 for a master's degree to make less money than what I'm making right now as a traveler? Bump that. That don't make no sense. Then, COVID went away. Obviously, it's still around, but the pandemic side of it went away, and with it, all the government money that was going into the hospitals and stuff like that went away. So when the hospitals lost all that funding, they started cutting back on contracts. And now if you're breaking six figures as kind of like a local travel in Georgia, Florida area, you're doing moderately decent. I'm saying without picking up any overtime, like just 36-hour contracts. Now, if you're traveling, like you're going to where the money's at, Texas, California, wherever, then you should be making more than $100K a year. You should be probably getting close to that 200 plus, maybe even 300K if you're really traveling to the hot spot, so to speak. But being, having little kids, everything like that, I stay in like a little 2-hour, 3-hour bubble. So I try to make sure I'm only about 3 hours away so I can get home if I need to. Which, I mean, that's already happened once when my father-in-law had his heart attack. I was able to get home, found out about it at like 11. I was, at the hospital with my family, 2:30 in the morning. I was there. And so it's just stuff like that. That's why I stay, even though I travel, I try to stay somewhat in the area, so to speak. And I still try to make it a decent enough wage where, my wife can be a stay-at-home mom with our kids and raise our kids the right way, in my opinion. But, yeah. So, I mean, that kind of gives you a glimpse of some of the background of me, I guess, and why it is the reason I do some of the things I do. But what I was saying on the travel side, the money's not there anymore, so it makes sense now for me to go back and do that nurse practitioner. Also, I'm tired of traveling. I've been doing this 4 years. This is going into my 5th year. I think November will be 5-year mark, and I'm just ready to be home. I'm ready to be home every night. Not doing the van life, sleeping in the car, van life, all that stuff. Not, coming home to a home cooked meal in my own bed every night. Obviously I don't want to take a huge pay cut when doing that. So, I'm trying to finish out this last year, do it one more year while I finish out this nurse practitioner, and then, once I transition to the nurse practitioner role, I can basically make what I'm making now as a travel nurse, if not more, depending on what positions I take. I could potentially be making even more than what I'm making now, and I can be home every night, and that's what I want. But yeah, um, big shout out to Staff Sergeant Rios. Like I always say, military was the first time I was around real men that took care of their family and were, a family man. And he was a prime example of it, or at least as much as I knew of him. He was a prime example of it and influenced me heavily. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Y'all stay blessed. Have a great day.